Welcome back to Brazilian Wood Depot's YouTube channel, where I talk about everything regarding Brazilian hardwood decking, siding, and flooring. This will be the first video in a series of videos called Problems with Ipe Decking, specifically 10 problems. Today I'm starting with one called cupping, and it has a lot to do with moisture equalization, so I'll go into what causes Ipe decking boards to cup, how to prevent that from happening, and the physics behind why it happens. Alright, so like I said before, this is going to be one video in a series of video called Problems with Ipe Decking. I want to show you where the article is that I'm kind of pulling this information from. If you go to our website, bwdepot.com, pulls you here to our homepage. And if you scroll all the way down past the tiles, all the way down to the bottom, you'll see a link that says blog. If you follow that, you'll find some blog articles here. I'm referring to this one here, 10 problems, 10 Ipe problems. It's really 10 common problems with Ipe decking. And the first one I'm getting into today is this one, Ipe wood can cup, which I go into detail in this article, but I'm going to go into a little more detail here with you. So, why does wood cup? And of course, we're talking about Ipe decking here in particular, but why does wood cup? Wood cups because of a moisture imbalance within the wood. So if you think of this piece of wood, this is a piece of Ipe here. If you think of this piece of Ipe as a porous material, think of it that the water and air is constantly in flux. Air moves through the board, and really so does moisture. You can't see it, but that's what's happening. When you have a moisture imbalance, that means somewhere in this piece you have more moisture than another part, which is going to make the wood want to do different funny things. And in this case, when we're talking about decking that's installed flat horizontally like this, typically moisture equalization or inequalization or moisture imbalances happen because the bottom of the boards are absorbing water and the top of the boards are getting dried out. So I've made this image here, pull that up. As you can see, what I'm indicating here is that you've got sunlight coming from the top, and if you've got a moisture problem here, the bottom of the board will begin to absorb that moisture while the top continues to dry. So the bottom expands out, the top contracts in, and what you get is a cupping. A concave side on the top, a convex side on the bottom. The question is, what do we do to make sure that doesn't happen? And it's really pretty simple, but if you don't take some of these things into consideration, you could have this problem. So let's talk about what you can do to mitigate these moisture problems, or I guess a better way to put it is, how can you promote moisture equalization? So one way to do that is always install Ipe decking on a frame or a substructure that promotes airflow beneath it. Never install it on a solid surface. You shouldn't install it on install it on a subfloor. Those are big no-nos. That'll almost guarantee that they're going to trap water underneath those boards, and then they will cup. The best situation for Ipe decking and wood decking in general is to have an open frame underneath that has some clearance underneath, and not to close in the sides too much. When you start closing in the sides, you're constricting that airflow so that when water and moisture falls in between the boards, it's getting trapped in this box that has a higher moisture content underneath, and then you've got a normal moisture content above the boards, which will change the moisture content of the boards themselves, which is what we're talking about. So elevation and airflow underneath the deck is always the best practice. Another thing is, always make sure to leave an 1/8 of an inch board spacing between each board. If you don't do that, one, they're likely to buckle because they will expand over the seasons, and when they get tied up next to each other, they'll just buckle like that. So you want an 1/8 of an inch gap that also allows air to move freely on all four sides of the board. And that should really be a no-brainer, but thought I'd mention it anyways. Another thing you can do, and let's go back to this article here. as you can see in this diagram or this image, this digitally generated image, is the soil is pitched down and away from the home. By doing this, you're promoting water to fall between the boards and then run off away from the deck, which is what you want to do. Another thing you can do is you can add a moisture barrier on top of this soil here so that the water runs down and again away from the home. What you don't want to do is put a moisture barrier on the soil where there is no pitch, because really what you're creating is a pool underneath the deck, and that is not a good thing. So there's pitch and moisture barrier. Right, underdeck systems. So underdeck systems are systems to keep a lower living area dry, and some people call them dry below systems. They can be problematic. The reason for that is, though, even though you have a pitch on your underdeck system that's supposed to run water out and away from the home, moisture still gets trapped in there to a certain degree. It doesn't run all the droplets off, and you kind of have the same problem as I described earlier, is boxing in that moisture and restricting the airflow so it doesn't have anywhere to go other than up to the bottom of the boards. Again, the bottom of the boards absorb it, and then the bottom expands, and then you have cupping. So dry below systems are something to really consider whether or not you're going to be constricting the airflow too much. There are a couple things you can do to mitigate that. One of the things, and we always recommend this for anybody using a dry below underdeck system, is bottom grooves. So what I'm holding here is a piece of Ipe 1x6, and it has 3 grooves in the bottom of the board, as you can see there. And what this does is it gives some space so that if the bottom of this board wants to expand, it has somewhere to go. It expands into these channels instead of pushing the sides of the board up, creating cupping. It's very, very, very effective. Typically, this board is just a scrap board that I picked up. Typically, you want these to go a little bit deeper than that. But bottom grooving is very effective, and it doesn't just come in handy when there's an underdeck system. It comes in handy for a few other reasons. We'll do this here for you, or you can take your table saw and you can rip these down yourself. Typically, what we like to see is about half the thickness of the board. That's the most effective way to do these grooves. These are a little bit shallow, but again, this is just kind of a scrap piece. Another thing, or another product that you can use, which is only found at Brazilian Wood Depot, and let me go back to my website here. Okay, so this was our article. I'm going to go to our website here, and there is a page, there's a video rather, where I talk about this product called Remo Decking, and here it is. I go into a lot more detail about the requirements, and I don't want to get into the requirements right now, but what we do is we groove, we mill the bottom of one side of the board into a square and the top of the other side, so that when the pieces come together, they interlock. And again, you want to go for about 1/8 of an inch board spacing. Obviously, you'd be face screwing, or you could do an undermount system. Deckwise makes an undermount system that works very well. This creates channels for the water to run down, and then you won't have moisture problems because the moisture is running away from the deck, not going through the boards. So you don't really have to worry about cupping because the moisture isn't going to get underneath the board. So very effective. There are some requirements, not to get into them, but one of them is the joists have to be running parallel to the home, because these boards need to run perpendicular to the home. Few other requirements, but that's the main one. Finally, and the last one is, if you have a situation where you just cannot achieve moisture equalization, that it's either going to be close to the ground or it's going to be flush with soil, or at grade. Pool decks often have this problem. Rooftop decks on waterproof membranes often have this problem. If you go back to our homepage again, scroll down to deck tiles. Deck tiles are a awesome solution-based product for coverages where you just can't use standard 1x6 or 5/4 by 6 decking, and they are 2 foot by 2 foot squares. you can find a whole lot more information about the thickness and dimensions and all this. But they're made up of 8 smaller boards, smaller in width, not in thickness. But these boards are smaller, so they just are not as prone to cupping. The physics just isn't there for them to cup. Also, it has a little bit to do with how they're fastened together. I don't want to get into that either, but you have 8 boards, just like you see here. You have 8 boards that are fastened together on the back by 3 cross boards, and it is a very effective way to cover areas that you may not have a whole lot of height to work with, because let's say you've got a door frame that's only 2 inches above your concrete slab, so you can't put in a sleeper system or a floating deck. It needs to be much lower. Deck tiles are a great way to solve this problem because, like I said, they won't cup. Now, you probably shouldn't install deck tiles where they're going to be in constant contact with water. It's just not a good practice, but being very close to the ground or having no air circulation beneath them isn't a problem with deck tiles. It's one of the only wood options that would be true for. So very, very good solution-based product for moisture equalization problems or moisture imbalance problems. And finally, what I would like to mention is that if you do have boards that are cupped, you have a deck right now, and the boards have cupped up and you're wondering if you have to get it replaced, usually the answer is no. Usually you can incorporate some of these changes as I just discussed to mitigate the moisture problems, and the boards will uncup by themselves, because once you equalize the moisture throughout the board, which means removing the moisture from underneath the deck, the boards just flatten out on their own because they don't want to cup. They would rather be flat. I know they don't have feelings or thoughts, but they really want to be flat in their original condition. They cup because they have to, because the moisture is making it the bottom expand. So it can absolutely be addressed. All right, that's all I have to say about cupping. I am going to make another video. Like I said, I'll show you again one more time here at the end. If you go to the bottom of our website, there's a blog section. I'm going to be going off these items, and probably I'll have a couple videos that combine 2 or 3 of them together. This one I wanted to do all on its own because it's the first one. Ipe wood can cup. It is true, but it won't as long as you take the steps to make sure there's not going to be excess moisture under the deck. So have a good one. We'll see you next time.